Welcome to the Family Life Blended podcast. I'm Ron Deal. We help blended families and those who love them pursue the relationships that matter most. Gayla Grace is back in the Family Life Blended studio with me today in Little Rock. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Ron. Good to be here.
If you don't know, Gayla hosts our monthly Women and Blended Families live stream.
Yes,
Gayla,
right.
why a live stream for women?
Well, there's some unique dynamics that women in blended families deal with. And so we have a different guest every month. We have a different topic. And we do it as a live stream because we can be interactive that way. We can answer questions. So our guests have the opportunity to put questions in the chat and we will answer them with our guests.
In real time.
In real time.
And of course, if you can't be in real time, then you can watch it later.
The recorded version later. That's right.
It's on social media and a lot of channels.
Yes,
Facebook.
YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. So Family Life Blended on all of those channels. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's great.
So you don't follow, you should follow. Or tell the woman in your life to follow.
That's right. Exactly. It's the second Tuesday of every month, 3:00 Central is the live and then the recorded version later.
Yeah, good stuff. Make sure you go back and watch some of the previous episodes. Gayla will also be speaking with me and Nan and others at our annual summit on Step Family Ministry. That's coming up October 10 and 11, 2024. We're going to be in Dallas, Texas this year.
Yes.
Always enjoy being in the Metroplex. Each year, if you're not familiar with the summit, we assemble the leading voices in the field of Step Family Ministry. We try to share everything from how to get started, how to launch a blended family ministry in your church, to the simple little things that every church can do without launching an entire ministry, to if you have one, how do you grow your ministry? Make plans to join us. The show notes will tell you how. Okay, today, let's talk about ghosts. Do you believe in ghosts?
Ghosts. Well, I mean, they are mentioned in the Old Testament, right?
They are. And it's not called a ghost. It's so weird. 1 Samuel chapter 28 is the story I'm thinking of. And if you're listening, you're going, what? Really? Yeah, I know. King Saul goes and he elicits the help of a medium, and she raises Samuel from the dead. They have a conversation. Samuel talks to Saul. So that's just one story. There's some weird stuff in the Bible.
There is. I agree with you on that.
But we're not talking about ghosts today.
Right.
We're talking about emotional ghosts.
Yes.
What we like to call the ghost of marriage past. And it's this concept, this idea of relationships. And when we experience hurt, we get a little residue on our heart. Now, you know what? I just realized it's not just about marriage. If you grew up in an abusive home, or you grew up with a pain of any sort, anybody who ever hurts you in any sort of significant way, that leaves a bruise, you could say, or residue, I like to say, on your heart.
Right.
And you're not the same. You kind of live with this sense of, wow, I got hurt. And that residue creates this hypersensitivity to what could happen again.
Right. That shows up then at unexpected moments, really.
That's right. And sometimes we end up kind of bringing our worst fear to the table, even when it's not happening in another relationship, but we're afraid it's going to happen. So that's what we're going to be unpacking a little bit today in our conversation. Sometimes the residue, Gayla, just sits there, but sometimes it gets active and it haunts us like a ghost does.
Right.
The ghost of marriage past is that we've had that conversation many times, is specifically related to a previous relationship where maybe it ended in divorce, but maybe it didn't, and maybe it was by death. But the point is, it was a hard relationship.
Something happened.
Yeah. And it just sort of creates, again, like this hypersensitivity that I could get hurt again.
Right.
Don't want to get hurt again. And the bottom line is trust goes by the wayside.
And fear comes to the surface.
And you don't want to risk yourself getting hurt again.
Right.
When fear is there.
Right.
And so what do? You end up getting guarded.
Yes.
Cautious.
Not opening your heart.
Kind of leaning back.
I
like to say, instead of leaning into your spouse, leaning in with trust and giving and being vulnerable.
Yeah, you just kind of stay on the shallow level because that feels safe instead of really opening your heart and diving in.
And what I think is really insidious about this is I'm quite certain in my own life I didn't really recognize when I was being
Mm-hmm.
haunted,
Yes.
when I am leaning back with a little bit of suspicion, little doubt, kind of
Mm-hmm.
double checking everything, kind of wondering if that's really what I think it is, or is that not what I think it is, or is this the worst of what I'm assuming it's going to be? That's the stuff that ghosts do to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so how have you seen that impact a marriage, for example?
Well, I'll speak to my own. I've walked through divorce, and there was addiction in that past with my former husband. And, then when you remarry, I had no qualms. Randy wasn't struggling with addiction. I mean, we dated long enough. I felt like I knew him well. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, some of the residue, I guess, is sitting there on my heart. I don't realize it
Mm.
until Randy doesn't come home at the time he says he's going to come home because he's working late, and my fear comes up. Where is he?
Yeah.
He said he'd be home by now. And so mine caught me off guard too, because I didn't realize that. I thought I'd kind of worked through this stuff. I'd grieved this loss back here, but the things that I had experienced had really impacted me in a way that then they showed up again in a new relationship.
I can testify to the same thing. There's a couple things I really want our listeners or viewers to catch from what you just said. Even though you had dealt with it, worked through it, and you probably had worked through some elements of it.
Some of it.
And even though Randy didn't do something like your first husband did, there was that doubt.
Right.
He comes home late. I don't know where he is. It's the unknown thing. That is all it takes to what we call trigger.
Yes.
All that old residue.
Right.
That then comes to life and screams.
Oh, and your mind takes off.
Yeah.
Your mind just goes to places it should not go because of what you've walked through previously.
And lo and behold, you're now living the ghost. You're
Right.
living as if it's true. Can I trust Randy? Can I trust this circumstance? Why didn't he tell me? What is it? And so all of those questions are coming alive, and your mind and body and spirit are beginning to respond as if it is true.
Right.
Now, I just got to throw something in here. We're about 6 months away from a new book that Nan and I have written with Dr. Terry Hargrave and his wife, Sharon. And this is the first time we're mentioning it on this podcast. Yeah. The title is The Mindful Marriage. And this book is for anybody, first marriage, second marriage, whatever the case may be. But it is getting at driving deep into this very matter that we're talking about. Why does that happen? Why do we get stuck? And most importantly, what in the world do we do about it?
Exactly.
And we're not going to spend a lot of time today unpacking that. That'll come with a later podcast.
Right.
But I just want to point out to people, this is hard stuff.
And it's real stuff.
When you get haunted, it's very, very real. Just one little tidbit I'll throw in about, well, why do you jump to that conclusion and think, wow, is the same thing happening with Randy that happened? Did you know your brain prefers what it knows over what it doesn't know? And it holds on to it even if it's bad news.
Because it's comfortable.
It's comfortable. It's sort of like it knows what it knows, what it knows.
Yeah.
And you already have a set of responses that your body has worked out, your brain has worked out about how to deal with things. And so you can go into, I know what this is and I know what to do about it. In a nanosecond. You don't, it's not conscious. It's pre-conscious.
Just happens. Yeah.
It happens so quickly. And that's where the ghost comes alive and takes over. And what's crazy about this is that all of a sudden you're responding to your partner as if they're the same person as the other.
Right. So you're responding to your partner unfairly. It wasn't right for me the minute Randy came in the door to jump on him.
Jump to the conclusions.
Yes.
And the irony is, so you jump on him or you accuse or whatever, and he's going, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Right.
And he's backing up from you, and now you're backing up from him. And, as the listener, this is stuff that we can all relate to. We all deal with this. This is not just somebody who's been through a bad divorce. This is anybody who's ever had any sort of pain on their heart.
Well, and I think about some people I've talked to through who they've walked through infidelity. And so then they've got some of this trust also in fear when a person doesn't show up or maybe just seems a little suspicious in their behavior. And there's a trigger because of what they've walked through.
So let's just be clear. Let's give some other examples besides just marriage. You complain about my child a lot.
Yes.
I think I know why. You don't like my child. What? Whoa. How'd you get to that conclusion? Where'd that come from?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something else going on inside you that's leading you to jump to that sort of conclusion? You don't want to combine our finances. We've heard that one a
We
number of
have heard that
times.
one. Mm-hmm.
And then here's what comes right behind it. Because you don't want oneness, because you don't trust me, because you're
Well,
afraid I'll take your money, because of what
because
happened.
you don't want to spend your money on my child.
Because you don't want, yeah. So again, the accusations are many. They go in all sorts of directions. But at the heart of it is a lack of trust.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
control. There's a little bit of control there too.
That's right. You go to control to try to deal with the lack of trust.
Right.
And then that's going to inadvertently make things a little bit more difficult. This is insidious.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to the one you said about you don't love my child. It's so easy as a biological parent to look at the step parent and not, you don't assume the best, you assume the worst. Like when they don't handle a disciplinary situation as you would, then it's automatically, well, you don't love my child. When it's just, this is who they are. They do things differently than we do. It doesn't mean they don't love your child.
I think one of the most intimate places this comes out is in a sexual relationship.
Intimacy.
Within a marriage.
Absolutely.
That's one of the most vulnerable places in our life, human experience. And it's very easy for people to, as I like to say, to be completely naked but fully clothed.
Oh, yeah.
Their bodies can be responding in a way that shows connectedness and togetherness, and yet your spirit and your heart can be closed to the other person. Kind of, you don't want to be vulnerable to them and risk yourself, putting yourself into their hands in such a way that they could hurt you.
Right. So you stay in the shallow end. You don't allow yourself to dive deep in.
Stay in the shallows.
Yeah.
One of the things, a book that I wrote with Dr. David Olson, we studied hard and looked at fear and couples that were forming blended family marriages. And this fear thing really,
it's big.
It's big. It holds us back. Yeah. Because what it does is I now assume the worst about a lot of things. And so I lean out, and now I'm cascading negativity onto lots of things. Oh, I know why that money thing. Oh, I know why that parenting thing. Oh, I know why that you look at me with a scowl on your face. And I know what it means, because my first spouse looked at me, and that was, the beginning of the end for our marriage. So again, jumping to conclusions. Here's another little symptom that you're being haunted by a ghost. And it simply is jumping to negative conclusions about the other person, negative interpretations, sometimes we call them.
Okay.
So it's, I see a behavior that if we asked 100 people on the street, what do you think of this person doing that? They'd go, well, I don't know. It doesn't really mean much to me. In other words, they would see it as neutral or benign. But when you see that behavior, you ascribe to it something malignant.
Right.
And so, it used to be conversational at the end of the day. When you come home, we'd sit down and eat dinner and used to talk more. You're not talking as much. And I know why. See, there's that negative interpretation. It's because you've stopped seeing me as important. You've stopped wanting to interact with my child. You've stopped caring as much about our family as I care about our family.
Yeah.
And those are dangerous conclusions.
Because I think the other thing that happens is we don't necessarily talk about it with that person. We just carry on this conversation in our head.
Isn't that the truth?
And that is what's so dangerous, because if you can begin to talk and both of you can have a healthy conversation about it, then you can come to the conclusion of, he doesn't mean anything by this, but I have completely interpreted this negatively and it's damaging.
Yeah. Good point. Let's talk a little bit about how you talk. How would you bring something like this up? Well, let's talk about what you wouldn't do. What you don't do is start off with, you're a dirty whatever, and call them a name and say, you don't talk to my kid anymore because you hate him, or you just don't care about us, or jumping out there with those accusations is not the place to start. The place to start is to look humbly, first of all, at yourself and say, I could be wrong about this. I could misunderstand. I could be, dare I say, now to say, do I have a ghost haunting me that's making me think negative things that aren't necessarily reality? Just starting with that thought helps you slow down, be less aggressive, be more open.
Right.
Hey, I'm wondering if we could talk about something. I'm noticing, but I'm not sure what it means.
And also, I think we can say, I feel.
Yeah.
This makes me feel,
And I could be wrong about that.
right. But I think it helps for our spouse to hear that, because sometimes we just don't realize
Yeah.
that what's going on makes another person, because we don't know all their past experiences. It's like you said, it's not just from what's happened in a previous marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I think about people who have been in hard family of origin situations, and so they never really got help for that as they grew up into adulthood, and so they had a parent that yelled at them all the
Mm-hmm.
time, and so then when they hear a raised voice, it's a trigger.
Right. Exactly. And it
And
sets off that residue on your heart. And now you're reacting and you're not thinking anymore. You're just sort of reacting and going into automatic response. And yeah, more than likely that automatic reaction is going to make things worse,
right,
not better.
right.
So it starts with slowing down,
Mm-hmm.
assuming that you might be mistaken,
Mm-hmm.
giving the benefit of the doubt.
So a posture of humility is what you're
Yes.
saying.
And slowly rolling into the conversation, and then listening.
Yes, listening. Mm-hmm.
Here's another little indicator, and I've noticed this in myself. When I am in a place of, for example, with my wife, Nan, when I'm in a place of correcting her comments to me, like, no, Nan, that's not what you think. Here's what you think.
Like you get into your therapist mode?
No, this would not be a therapist mode. I would never do this as a therapist.
Oh, okay.
I would never tell somebody what they think. I would be far more patient and listening. But when I'm in my husband afraid mode,
Okay.
then I do.
Right.
Like she'll start to say something and I'm like, wait, that doesn't line up with what I've already determined to be the case for you. So see how the
Yeah.
haunting has led me to a
Mm-hmm.
conclusion.
Right.
And now I'm arguing with her about what she feels. That's like a huge symptom, an indicator. Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
This is about me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to slow that whole thing down.
Right.
Or this ghost is going to get the better of me and us, because when the ghost is there, it doesn't just haunt you, it haunts your relationship. It will not allow you togetherness, closeness, trust.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially because I feel like sometimes we expect them to fix their part, and then that's going to take care of us. So, for instance,
Hmm.
in the situation I described, am I going to always expect that Rainey's supposed to be home at a certain time and that there's never extenuating circumstances? I mean, this is before cell phones,
Yeah. Yeah.
So he couldn't just drop everything and call me all the time.
Which, and even with a cell phone now, if he didn't call you, that'd almost be a little worse, wouldn't it? Because
Yeah,
you could have
right,
called me.
right. They can call you.
That's right. And he did. So what does that mean? Are you just like not mindful of me? Or
Mhm.
are you actually moving away from me? Like, what does it mean? That's where ghosts get us.
Right.
It takes something that could very, very well be benign.
Mhm.
In a loving, trusting, safe relationship, you would just say, that means nothing. Yeah, it kind of was an irritant, but it wasn't a dagger.
Right.
But when you add a ghost into the equation, all of a sudden that little benign irritant becomes something huge.
Mhm.
And if you're listening to us right now and you're going, oh my goodness, I can see that in myself. You're thinking, what do I do with this?
Mhm.
Well, you start talking to the ghost. It's one of the things you do. I would put words on it. Like one of the things I've encouraged people to do is write down what that ghost tells you to believe, to think,
So
to
the lies,
feel, and to do.
basically.
Write the lies.
Okay.
Put them on paper.
Okay.
And you might be, you don't have to share it with anybody yet.
Mhm.
Just put it on paper so you can see, yep, this is what I think, this is what I feel, and this is what I do.
Mm.
And the reason you just start with that is because you've got to own that voice in your head and recognize it as the liar.
Well, as insidious. I mean, I bet if you do that and then you go back on a day where you're a little more sane and you read it, you're like, that's craziness. How did I come up with that?
Exactly.
But in the moment when you've been triggered, it's easy. It happens.
So in that sane moment where you look at it and you go, that's not the truth. You now have a contrast, the lie versus the truth.
Right.
And the truth is going to be based on what you know of yourself, what you know of the person, of your relationship. Are they really this kind of person are they exactly like my first spouse? No, they're not. And how are they different? Like all of a sudden you can see the difference, the
Right.
contrast. And so what you have to learn to do is catch that ghost whispering in your ear something negative.
Mm-hmm.
And you then have to begin to preach at the ghost. Now I use that word intentionally. Preach. Not just, okay, ghost, go away. No, you got to be a ghost buster. You got to preach at it. And what do preachers go for? The truth, right? You
Right. Of
preach
course.
the truth to yourself. Who was it? Somebody said once, we listen to ourselves far more than we should. We should be preaching to ourselves
Yes.
a lot more than we do.
Right.
And this is especially true when you've identified that negative ghost that's whispering.
Yeah, and I almost think that you could write down affirmations at things that you might need to say over to yourself on days where you can see you're struggling with the ghost in order to help you really put those lies at bay and focus on what the truth is.
I was thinking about 1 John 4:8, perfect love casts out all fear. But I think it's equally true that perfect fear casts out all love.
Oh, yeah.
So if you don't get a handle on this fear, this ghost, it will make you unloving, less loving.
Right.
Which makes you less appealing.
Well, and it
less
just
attractive to be around for the other person.
And creates division. Creates division in the marriage. Yeah.
So it comes down to that, creating that contrast, the lie versus the truth, and you have to confront it. Gayla, one of the other little insidious pieces here, and then there's a couple of scripture passages I think we could read just to remind ourselves of the truth versus what we're trying to do here.
Right.
But when you get stuck with a ghost and you think it's your spouse's job or the stepchild's job or your child or your former spouse's job to start acting in a way that you no longer have any concern or doubt or worry, fear, you've made yourself a prisoner of them. So let me say that again. Let's just think of a scenario where you're married to somebody, and we just go back to your example with Randy. Okay. First husband proved to you he was untrustworthy.
Right.
And yep, little things added up to big things added up to the demise of a relationship. So there's a little thing with Randy. It's like, wait a minute. Is this that same stuff? Here we go again. Oh no, that's ghost talk.
Right.
And for you to say, wait a minute, what is that really who he is? What do I know about him? No, my goodness, he's thoughtful. He's a great, I know Randy. He's a great guy. Servant, got a big heart. Does he make mistakes? You bet. He's just like the rest of us. But you look at it and you go, no, that's not who he is. He's this kind of a person. And right now I'm irritated, but that doesn't mean I can't trust him.
Right.
That will help you get out of it. But if instead you say, oh, I'm just going to wait and watch Randy. I'm going to make sure he doesn't ever do anything wrong again. And as soon as he gets it all right, then I'll trust him.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Oh, it's not going to happen.
You're a prisoner of Randy.
Yeah.
And him just being a human and messing up a little bit every now and then means you're perpetually waiting to not be afraid anymore. You can't make it Randy's responsibility. It is your responsibility to wrestle with your ghost.
Yeah. And Ron, I think sometimes it takes a third party to help us with that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we may need to get counseling. We may need to, or have a wise friend who loves us and knows us and will speak into us.
Good point.
But sometimes we need an objective person to help us. Now, they may not use the word ghosts, but I think that we can explain what's going on and they will recognize it and help us, especially if it's a Christian friend who can also pull out scripture and say, how do you apply scripture to that? Because that doesn't seem like something that is really going to be a truth.
Speaking of scripture, Colossians chapter 3, verse 8. But now, Paul says, you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, the ghost inhabited self,
Right.
and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Then he goes on. Verse 12, put on then, again, here's the contrast, for the old versus the new. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, put on compassionate hearts and kindness, humility and meekness and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against the other, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. And above all these things, he says, put on love. That is the journey. Especially when you recognize a ghost, you got to go, whoa, okay, there's this part of me that shows up every now and then, and I got to recognize for what it is, and I need to know what it says, and I need to understand that so that I can take it off, put it away, and put on these other things. Because it's these other things that are going to, ironically enough, bring me emotional safety, that it's going to bring unity to our relationship. It's going to foster trust between the two of us. So if I don't move toward those things, then I'm not going to find that trust relationship that I'm looking for.
Yeah. And just like it says here, they're not going to always get it right. And so maybe there are times that they contribute to our ghost a little bit. And it calls us to forgive and still put on love when that happens.
Wow.
It's about us, our behavior, not asking something of another person.
So good. So good. Well, we talk about ghosts in the book, The Smart Step Family Marriage. That book we'll have a link in our show notes. If you want to learn more about this concept, you want to do some digging into your own life, your own relationships, then I would suggest they look there.
Yeah, it's good stuff in there.
Thank you for being with me.
Yeah,
today.
pleasure.
It's really good. If this conversation has blessed you, would you consider making a tax-deductible donation to Family Life Blended? Listeners who make a donation to Family Life Blended this month get a free copy of Lauren Wrightsema's book, In Their Shoes. It's our way of saying thank you for your support. Because this is exclusive to Family Life Blended, our division of Family Life, make sure you use the link in our show notes so you'll get the proper credit. Okay, leave a review or a rating. That's always helpful. Lets other people find us. And don't forget our Summit on Step Family Ministry coming up. Tell a pastor, a leader, someone in your church, so they will consider joining us. Maybe you'll join us as well. The show notes, again, has a link. Or you can just simply go to our website, summitonstepfamilies.com. Next time, I'm going to be talking with author and brain surgeon, Dr. Lee Warren. We're going to be talking about grief, the neural frameworks of your brain. By the way, that's sort of what we've been talking about here today. And we're going to be talking about renewing your mind. That's next time on Family Life Blended. I'm Ron Deal. Thanks for listening or watching. And thank you to our production team and donors who make this podcast possible. Family Life Blended is part of the Family Life Podcast Network, helping you pursue the relationships that matter most.